welcome to Axios House. I'm Allison Schneiders. I'm a managing editor at Axios, and we have a really exciting lineup of speakers this whole week. To kick us off today, we're going to dive into a really important topic at WEF, but also much more broadly, which is about building a better AI through better data. And so if you're on social media, please make sure to follow along to everything we're doing here in Davos at Axios, and use the hashtag Axios events. So thank you for being here. And without further ado, I'm going to welcome our first guest. So please come up to the stage. This is Arthi Prabhakar. She is the director of the White House Office of Science and Technology Policy. Thanks for being here. Thanks so much.
Great to be here.
Yeah, we're going to have fun. All right. So there's
Hi, everyone.
There's a lot of ground to cover. Okay.
Go.
Go. So building a better AI, I think a lot of people have a lot of different ideas about what that means and what the priorities should be. And you are in a very unique position. So can you talk about what you think is the biggest priority in the time in between now and November, I guess?
So building a better AI has been the focus of all the work that President Biden's been driving from the White House. AI is in our lives already in so many different ways. But when ChatGPT burst on the scene and all of a sudden millions of people were able to interact with a chatbot, all of a sudden we started seeing it everywhere. And the president was clear from the beginning that AI is one of the most powerful forces of our times. That it's going to be used for good and for ill, and that our job is to manage its risks so that we can seize its benefits. And one thing that I think is just completely clear every time President Biden ever talks about AI is seeing the bright and the dark side together. And so really the challenge is exactly what you said, Allison, which is how do we harness this technology, manage it, make sure it's responsible, build a better AI, but then use it to go to the stars and to do big things. So that's very much the focus. As you have seen, President Biden moved out very actively, very urgently over the last calendar year, getting voluntary commitments from leading AI companies, but also putting out a very substantial, a broad and a comprehensive AI executive order, which is basically saying everything that the executive branch of the United States can do under existing law across every area of AI application and risk, and then looking ahead to the impact on workers, what's it going to mean for our economy. And I think that's such an important foundation to start with. That work, those were homework assignments for departments and agencies, but people are moving out, and I think I'm very optimistic that we are going to get on a good path, but there is a ton of work to be done, including on making the technology itself much better.
So a better AI, I think, that implies the world as it could be, or maybe somebody thinks it should be. And that's not necessarily as it is. And so I'm curious, I guess, that's like a very deeply transformative idea. And so how much of that is a data problem? How much of that is a problem with the AI models? How much of that is a tech problem and a people problem?
Right. It's both. It's both, absolutely. And I think, just maybe to step back for a minute, when we talk about artificial intelligence, we tend to talk about it as a technology. But the first thing to realize is that people choose what AI models to build. They train it on data. Often it's data that's about or created by human beings. And then they choose what applications to build, and then other people choose how to use those AI models and what to do with them. And especially with generative AI, it's actually the interaction between the human and the AI system that creates amazing text and amazing images and video. So I think if we're going to get to this future, which we have to get to with better AI, we have to start by understanding that it's a socio-technical system. It's not just a technology by itself. And in fact, I think if we're only going to think about it in terms of computer architectures and data and ones and zeros, we're not going to get there, because this is a deeply human technology. And understanding people, everything from our strategic motivations as individuals down to how we speak, every layer of that is going to be critical to charting this course to better AI.
That's a far harder problem.
Yes, people are really hard.
People
That's
are really
exactly
hard.
right.
Exactly. And we were just talking about when you were the head of DARPA, you had a big initiative around social science, which was sort of surprising. And I'm guessing, I'm wondering, how much do you think there's enough emphasis on that now in the work that's being done? And if not, what should be done?
Yeah, I think that's very worth thinking about. When I ran DARPA, the Defense Department's central research agency, which the purpose of DARPA is to look at what's bubbling in research and figure out what is the basis for powerful new technological capabilities. In the time that I was leading DARPA 2012 to 17, we looked around and we said, things are changing in social sciences, in part because, largely, I would say, because of information technology and data analysis and AI and the ability to reason about causes. It's a new chapter across the social sciences. And so that very much caught our attention at DARPA. We hired the first ever PhD anthropologist as a program manager at DARPA. And then that became something that I was personally very interested in, and I spent some time focusing on it. But I actually think that we've already arrived in a time in which we are doing social science and using social science. We just don't call it that. But every time you're getting an ad that is targeted to you in the online environment, someone is using technology to influence you to lead to a different outcome. And of course, that's one of the most benign examples of the kinds of things that are happening. So I think it actually helps us tremendously if we're clear and conceptualize this as being about people as much as it is about technology. It's happening anyway.
On the people front, there are, I think it's like, don't quote me on this, but I think it's about 4 billion people are going to the polls this year in the world. Do you think the world is ready for what AI's role is going to be in that, or how AI is going to appear?
Well, we're going to find out, and let me tell you about what's happening in the United States, because I think this is an extremely important question for democracies around the world. When it comes to our actual election systems, in the United States, those are state and local responsibilities. At the federal level, the Department of Justice and the Department of Homeland Security, the intelligence community work very closely with our partners at state and local levels to make sure that that system has integrity. The information environment, however, that people are submerged in and that shape their choices, we already know that we know that information environment has already been eroded. With the exchanges that people have in the social media environment. And absolutely, I think we're all very clear that generative AI, with all its tremendous promise, this is one of the greatest risks, is that it could dramatically accelerate and amplify that erosion of information integrity. And that's why one of the areas of focus, and President Biden's executive order recently was specifically focused on fraud and deception, and making sure that we get on a path to where the AI media that are generated are visible, known to the user. So the work there is focused on content provenance. It will focus on working with industry and the technical community to make sure that we get on a good path. And government's going to be the first user. So, one of the most important things is for citizens to be able to know when they see information, to know that it is authentically from their government. So we'll play that active role. So those are some, I think, very important steps, but just to be clear, that none of that is a magic solution. And I think this issue of the role of AI in our democracies is one where civil society plays a particularly important role as well.
So on the issue of authenticating, you just reminded me of it, like there's a pretty thin line, right, between authenticating something and surveillance. How do you ensure that line is kept?
Say another sentence about what you have in mind, so I understand.
If you are a government authenticating the media that's being put out versus surveilling.
Yeah, that's not what I meant.
Okay.
So let me separate two things. One is everyone, companies, consumers in the information environment, we want a future where people can look at a social media post and know whether that image was generated by an AI system or whether it's authentic. The government will play a role in helping to build standards for that, but that ultimately has to get resolved in the public sphere. Right. The second piece I was talking about was government using those tools to authenticate the information that we put out so that people can have confidence in it.
Got it. So speaking globally, the U.S. and China both just signed on to a UN AI initiative very recently. How do you see the U.S. and China working together around some aspects of AI regulations? I guess which ones are you most optimistic about, whether directly or more in a multilateral setting?
Yeah. Let's start by talking first about the
Yeah.
whole globe, because I think it's really in that context. And I think the thing that's clear to everyone is that this technology doesn't stop at anyone's borders.
Right.
We're very lucky to have companies that are driving a lot of the major advances in AI in the United States today. But in a sense, that also means we have a responsibility to make sure that we deal with this seriously and lead in doing that. But from the beginning, throughout this last year, as we've had a major focus in the Biden administration on AI, we've been closely working with our allies and partners around the world. Mm-hmm. That includes the G7 Hiroshima process. It includes G20 activities on AI. It includes work at the United Nations. It mm-hmm. includes the AI Safety Summit that the UK hosted, that Vice President Harris spoke at. And it includes a commitment that President Biden and President Xi made when they were together in mm-hmm. November to work on AI. And I think, there are things that everyone in the world needs to agree on AI. And these issues of quality of the models, knowing that an AI model is effective, safe, and trustworthy, mm-hmm. that's foundational to everything we need AI to do. And yet actually our ability to do that is we barely can do that. We really have such limited technical capability. No one in the world really knows how to robustly assess if an AI model is effective, safe, and trustworthy. Mm-hmm. And so that's an area where global cooperation, I think, can be extremely constructive. And of course, we will compete globally on AI applications as well. But we're very committed to working with partners and allies around the world to build this a foundation so that we can all move forward with AI.
Circling back to building better AI through better data, the world is awash in data, but to your, different countries have their hands around different things. How does that piece of it, the data piece, how do you think that's going to play out? It's very funny. I've never had someone behind me while I'm interviewing someone. I'm trying not to. Sorry.
I didn't see it.
You did. I'm sorry. I shouldn't have said anything.
No, it's actually, I think this is sort of the whole spirit here, which is great.
Yeah, it's great.
Listen, I thought it was great you were focusing on data in this session, because what is an AI system? It's a computational system that's trained on data and then is able to make statistical estimates of various sorts. And, to me, the root of the power of this AI moment is the fact that AI is powerful and moving fast, but it is so broad. And the reason for that is that it can train on so many different kinds of data. Here we are in the information age. So we all see generative AI and the language and the media that set of technologies trains on. But AI systems also train on sensor data and scientific data, administrative data, financial data, all the data. Every single time you're in the online environment, every time you're clicking and surfing, it's training on that. And so the data is the core resource. And so building better AI systems for sure involves being better at curating the data and being deliberate about the data that goes in. And that said, I would also offer a caveat, because maybe just to look under the hood when you look at one of these AI systems. I'm sure when I use a chatbot, and many of you may have had this experience, it feels like you're getting search results on steroids, right? Like it feels like it's stitching together a bunch of facts. Of course, that's not actually what's going on. What that chatbot is doing is stitching together fragments of words. So you can actually have a large language model that's trained on perfectly good data, but since it's not stitching facts together, it's stitching sub-words together, that's not a full guarantee that you're going to get better outputs. And so I think, yes, we should have better data. We should do more work on better guardrails and better red teaming, but we just need to understand that none of those ends with a guarantee. They're necessary, but they're not really going to be sufficient to be fully confident yet about what these systems will and won't do.
How long have you been here in Davos? Did you just
I arrived yesterday.
Okay, so AI is like everywhere.
AI is everywhere.
I'm curious what you've seen so far, or what you're going to be keeping an eye on, and through this lens of better AI. What are you looking for to hear from people, or what are you sort of already hearing or seeing?
Yeah, it's in so many of the sessions and so many of the things that companies and governments are focused on here. The two things that I'm really staying strongly focused on is one is exactly what we're talking about: is how do we build better AI technology and systems, understanding that they are human and technology systems. And then as we do that, then the next question becomes that's about building a solid foundation. But we want to stand on that foundation and reach for the stars. And I think in sync with making AI safe and responsible, we also want to be driving the great applications that are ahead. And for sure, companies are going to build products and services for consumers and for other businesses. Everything that can generate revenues and profits, people are going to go do. And we want that to happen. We want it to happen responsibly. But I think a lot about public missions and the things that government is responsible for, and our national priorities and the huge aspirations that we have as in the United States, but also as a world. And if you think about how vital AI's role can be in addressing the climate crisis, in boosting health outcomes, in changing education and training, that list is very, very long. And contrary to popular opinion, it doesn't magically happen when you have some data and an AI system. A few other things have to happen. And so I think that's going to be some of the really fun work. And I'm very interested to hear what people are thinking about in terms of powerful applications as well.
Great. Well, thank you so much for being here. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Allison.
And everybody stay right here for our next interview with our publisher, Nicholas Johnston.
Okay,
Thank
thanks.
you.
The stairs. Thank you, Allison. I'm Nick Johnston. I'm the publisher of Axios. Thank you all for being here. This is our fourth year of Axios House. It's amazing to see the crowd out here today. We've got a stacked week of events, so be sure to check us out online or grab one of our events people here. They can tell you what we have lined up. And of course, none of this would be possible without the support of our partners this week. And so a huge, huge thanks to our inaugural kickoff sponsor this afternoon, Gecko Robotics. And I welcome for a view from the stage conversation, Gecko's CEO, Jake Lucerian. Jake, welcome to Axios House. How are you? So let's start at the beginning, I guess. More than 10 years ago, right out of college, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, you started Gecko Robotics. What was the idea here? What was the problem you were setting out to solve?
Well, thanks, Nick. I'm excited to be chatting about this. Well, at the beginning, I was in college doing electrical engineering in Western Pennsylvania, and just a curious young engineer. I was studying electrical engineering, but really didn't have a great idea how power was made. So I went to a power plant that was nearby the university, and I got to see problems firsthand that the power plant was facing. So 40% of the year, this power plant had 4 shutdowns that caused it not to be able to make power. And the only way to solve for the problem was actually sending a human into a confined space on a rope 100 feet up in the air in the steel enclosure called a boiler. And that person was basically looking at finding the spots in this huge environment that might cause a catastrophic failure for the facility. And unfortunately, that person fell and died the year before I got there. And this person wasn't actually able to solve the problem because there's just too much data to collect and not a good way of storing that information. So it really inspired me to decide to build a system that could gather information and data that could help solve what I thought to be a really important
Find
problem.
a solution that wouldn't involve a human.
That wouldn't put a human in harm's way. And then also could look at the problem for the gravity of it. I mean, most of us don't know, but we spend about $3.5 trillion every single year on fighting corrosion, and that's just to maintain the current state of infrastructure, which is a crazy number.
Just stop it. Just
Okay.
on 3.5 trillion on corrosion.
Yeah, you wouldn't
Right?
think
Something
of it,
you would
right?
never think of for a second. It is a massive, massive economic impact.
Yeah, and Fortune 500 companies lose about $1.4 trillion a year because of forced outages. It blew my mind back in 2013 when I started Gecko that was possible. That was
Blew my mind right now.
Yeah. So in college, I built a robot that could climb walls. And when I was climbing walls, it was gathering information about the health of the built structure, basically doing an MRI scan of a physical structure. And it got me thinking, I wonder what else in our society we rely on based on bad information that humans are collecting by hand in dangerous environments. And so it seemed like a really important problem to solve that no one was solving. So for the next 10 years, I've been building Gecko Robotics to basically try and understand and build solutions where data is first, and you go to the source. And if you can collect enough information, you can solve some pretty incredible problems.
And that's a good transition to this. This is not a robotics conversation. This is an AI and a data conversation. So go deeper into what you mean by that. Like, how is AI a piece of this to build better data?
Yeah, well, so it was interesting. We just released, we had a press release that just launched that describes the impact to net zero that we have. And I'll talk about that in a second. But one thing that maybe would be surprising for a lot of you is that 90% of public and private sector CEOs believe that AI will transform their business. But only 75%, but 75% of CEOs also say that they don't actually have a trust in their in data to actually be trustworthy.
It's a big problem.
It's a really big problem. And so, what robotics has allowed for us to do, and this is a fundamental philosophy of the company, was if you could understand first-order data sets, go to the source of truth. And then once you have all this information, you can then build interesting AI and software modules. We use a product called Cantilever that we launched last year to drive insights, to try and solve these problems like how do you prevent a bridge from failing, how do you prevent a dam from exploding or a ship from being in dry dock for 18 months. These are problems you can solve if you have really good data and then software to be actually able to drive insights and outcomes.
So it's a little bit like the best data you can hope for is data where you know where it came from, and if it came from your robot, then you know that it hasn't gone through, you can trust it, I guess. It's like robots almost as a form of trust for data collection.
Exactly. Basically, it's interrogate the information and data and make sure you're getting the highest fidelity of it, so that when you build solutions, customers that are spending millions of dollars on these digitization solutions don't have to be disappointed, and we don't have to take steps backwards as it relates to digital transformation in the energy infrastructure and physical realm.
I mean, this is weird. Like, the Davos, the theme this year is trust, and here we are talking about the trustworthy data gatherers are robots.
It's in the built world. There's really no better way, and I think it's why not? Like, let's put the robots in the most dangerous environments to collect the health of the built world. And so what Gecko's building is the default platform for the health of built structures, whether it be in energy, infrastructure, manufacturing, government, et cetera.
So you mentioned this briefly. Let's come back to this on sustainability now. Tell us how this solution fits into those kinds of goals that lots of companies have.
Okay, great. So so most of you also won't know. So when I was back in college, that power plant, what was wild was that we never heard about this boiler before, which basically turns water into steam. Well, those explosions inside of that unit actually represent a 5% impact on global emissions. When things break, like a pipeline exploding or a tank leaking oil into a river or a power plant having a forced outage, these things are massive impacts to emissions. And there was a environmental scientist that we partnered with, and they went in and did a great deep dive study about what's the impact to the environment when built structures fail. And the report just came out. We just did a press release on this. About an 18% impact by 2030 is the impact of physical things breaking and failing to emissions. So 18%. We could be 18% better and on our way to net zero if we could just stop built things from breaking, which is a wild.
Again, another one of these massive numbers that you wouldn't even think of, right? If you could somehow stop corrosion, that's kind of the impact on it. Make these things.
It's these secrets hiding in plain sight, Nick. Like, we don't think about these types of ways to impact the fight towards net zero. And maybe in 10 years we'll have some breakthrough technologies that scale and we'll be able to completely transition us. But guess what? 80% of emissions comes from the energy sector, and 81% of our energy comes from fossil fuels. That's not going to change that's not going to change dramatically in the next 10 years, even with our best efforts. It's taken us $5 trillion over the past few years to go from 82% to 81%. So we have to be attacking the problem by finding and investing in solutions, not just that impact renewables, which Gecko also does, but also that impacts the energy that we are relying on today. So we have to be pragmatic. And one of the best ways to be pragmatic is using better data to actually solve for the problems of today, as it helps us guide what we build tomorrow.
Yeah. All right, so this isn't your first rodeo at Davos. You've been here before, so you know what I love about Davos is the crowds for this. Like, you get people in a room. These are the people who really care about these kinds of topics and are probably very important on these kind of topics, or at least think they are. So, what is the takeaway for them on this when they go back to their home countries, to their home agencies, to their companies? Like, what do you hope that they learn about this problem that we're trying to solve?
Well, I think that's a great question. The biggest thing for me is I'm an engineer. I'm very pragmatic. I think the most impactful thing that we can do is invest, start companies, and ensure that we are building the right and creating the right policies around interrogating the decision-making tools that impact the most around net zero. So I want to see more investments, more companies that are looking to interrogate the outputs that our AI gods are putting out. If we don't interrogate the sources of truth and find and go to the first order, unfortunately, we're going to continue to be disappointed and potentially even worse, have catastrophic outcomes if we actually aren't building things with high integrity. So robotics allows for us to go out and allow for an unbiased way of collecting source truth. Once you can find the source truth and build the foundational layers, it's incredible the kinds of tools that you can build to really affect outcomes as it relates to net zero. Right. So invest, start funds, start companies, and change policies so they orient around sources of truth.
The goal of making sure AI is built on truth.
If it's not, it spells doom and catastrophe. And the AI doomsday talk. The reason I think that's a very legitimate conversation is in part because, or mostly because, I have a very hard time believing that we interrogate data with high enough fidelity.
Yeah. All right. So before we get the hook here, Axios House end on one fun thing. In Davos, we end on one Davos thing. As I said, not your first time here. This is the first day. Give the newbies some hot tips. Well, how to navigate the week.
Okay, yeah, not the first Davos. Well, at my first Davos, this is a funny story. I'll strip out the names, but a very prominent U.S. official was leading the charge on climate change. Very, very prominent. And first Davos, I was so excited, to meet this person. And so I went up to him and I was like, we are working on some incredible things to impact emissions in a way you haven't even heard of, that totally dwarfs all the things that you've been talking about. It's going to be incredible. I'd love to talk to you about how we get, how we can partner on things. And he said, I don't want to fucking talk, get out of here. So I was like, everyone always told me like all the serendipitous moments that happened at Davos, and this was not a serendipitous moment.
All right.
And so
be ready for rejection.
Okay, yeah, be ready for rejection. So to the you're not that important. It was a nice reminder, and also that it's not about your ego, it's about the mission. And so luckily, a few Davoses later, we've gotten closer. And now he's a big fan of what we're doing, but that was a funny moment. But it's a great reminder of just the mission's more important than you, and so even rejection is okay.
That's awesome, Jake. Thanks so much for being here, and thanks to Gecko for making today possible. Stick around. We've got the host of Axios One Big Thing, Nalabudu, up next.
Thanks, Nick. Hi, everyone. I'm Nyla Budu. I host our Axios podcast, One Big Thing. We have a weekly podcast that comes out every Thursday. It's an interview show in smart brevity style. I've been talking to folks here. It's not an hour-long interview show. It's 20 minutes. So please subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Without further ado, please, I'd like you to have a warm welcome to our Axios stage, Schneider Electric CEO, Peter Herweg. Peter, welcome to Axios House.
Thank you so much for having me.
So we're just hearing about AI, also about the potential doom and gloom. So you wrote your master's thesis on AI back in 1988, is that correct?
Yeah, I'm so old, sorry.
No. So I want to ask you about what your perspective was on thinking about last year when generative AI in particular sort of burst into the public consciousness. Given the perspective that you have, how should we be thinking about things, and how are you all thinking about this at Schneider Electric?
So first of all, I would say, the technology is around AI for 45 plus years, and but for a long time, nothing has happened because we didn't have the right compute power, we didn't have the bandwidth, and we didn't have large language models. That was really the pivoting moment in last year. So the combination of the large language models plus the more industrial mathematical AI on data that comes out of the plants and out of the shop floor really enables our clients to go faster in digitizing and creating transparency and also taking action.
So you all at Schneider have pivoted to the Internet of Things and also advising clients on this. Can you just first catch us up quick here on what your investments look like in terms of making use of AI tools, both for your employees as well as for products and solutions?
Yeah, maybe for everybody to know, we're very practical people at Schneider, 150,000 employees. What we do is we're electricians, we're automation engineers, and we love software and we love digitizing. So we've started to deploy AI in our products roughly 15 years ago. Simple stuff, a little bit more sophisticated than what I wrote in my thesis at the time, but helping to predict the future. If you have a lot of industrial data out of a building, out of a data center operation, out of an infrastructure, think about the grid, or think about a hospital, think about a pharmaceutical plant. If you can start predict the future, you can actually increase output with the same input. That's called efficiency or productivity. And efficiency is something extremely important. It's the primary driver for sustainability.
So as you are thinking about that, the idea, as you were mentioning all of these things, I'm thinking about the security risks involved in that. You all are building these products in-house for a reason. Can you share a little bit about your philosophy around data leakage and privacy in particular?
No, it's super important. It's super important for our clients. With that, it's super important for us. If you think about some of our solutions that are, I said critical infrastructure. Many of you have probably heard many years ago that there were cyber attacks on nuclear power plants or on the grid or other power plants to take out critical infrastructure. And we've been working with those clients, and it's not the typical IT cybersecurity that you talk about, but you have your HVACs that are coolers that are connected. You have your machinery that is connected. You have every worker on the ground that has human-machine interfaces that all have critical interaction points, and if your network is not segregated, you get from any place into any place in the company, and that has happened. So it's critical for us because we're saying we're the largest industrial data custodian of our clients in the world.
And so when we were talking backstage or in the green room about not just the idea of AI, but HI. What is the culture shift and what sort of values are you teaching and talking about with workers when it comes to this in particular and data security?
So again, coming back to the practical work, technology can do so much, but usually the weakest point in the whole security chain is the person. So it is important to deploy a little bit of HI, human intelligence, to it, and it needs to start pretty high in the organization because these things need to be driven. People need to be trained, and we shouldn't forget about people on the shop floor. That's, we talked about this nuclear power plant, and it was in the Middle East somewhere. I'm not going to go into further detail. What happened is one of the employees found a USB stick on the ground, and he was interested. It's not sophisticated, right? And you can have all kinds of policies, but if you don't train your people, then this is what happens.
And so when you're thinking about you're saying at every level, can you give me a sense of what are the top values or philosophies that you're sharing with people? I imagine this boils down to, a lot of this seems like it's probably common sense in a way.
It is common sense, but if we're taking a practical example of our own factory, and we have 170 roughly factories globally. 5 of them are the WEF Lighthouse factories, and some of them are in locations where the average age of the worker is 50. So if you say you cannot train those people, please come see me afterwards. It's possible. So we've trained people. This is a fully digitized factory where we have a solid understanding of our energy landscape, of our production landscape. We know when machines will fail, and there are simple things when people come in. And they do have USB sticks. They can put it in and it will be scanned, and we check whether it's a safe one. As a simple example, I don't want to get too technically sophisticated here, but it is simple stuff that needs to be trained on the ground, on the shop floor. No USB plug is open. We use monitoring software of the OT network and so forth. So quite a variety of things. But you need to train the people. As I told you, every Friday afternoon, and this is a highly unionized factory. For those who have a factory in France or in Germany, for example, is heavily unionized, and or in the US. So we had Friday afternoon sessions, and we trained people, and it was good to see that even the more experienced ones really embraced it.
Friday was Education Day. Is it
Friday
still?
afternoon, Friday.
Still?
We still
Half a day.
I don't know for that specific factory, but we've done it. We're probably halfway through of our sites, and that's what happens.
So let's talk about data, particularly when it comes to sustainability in the work that you all are doing. Can you just share a little bit about, we were just also talking about some specific examples of what you're looking at, how data is at the heart of everything that you all are doing.
I love talking about that all the way to the practical work. If, high level, we say sustainability is equal to electrification plus digitization. What does that mean? Electrify every of your process. Electricity is the most efficient secondary energy form that exists. Of course, one needs to see how it is generated, but we are rather on the consumer, on the demand side of it, while we help, of course, to have renewables. Now, digitize, you want to get as many data points that you have in your facility. It can be a building, hospital, a data center, you pick it, infrastructure or a plant. And I'm going to go into a pharmaceutical plant with our client, Takeda, in Singapore. So we've talked with them, and we've been able to drive down, because we have all the data points over a long history of time. We can put them into context, and then AI tools actually help to tell people how they can save energy. Then we've said we also put what's called a mini grid into the facility, so they're also generating solar energy. And after the project was finished, they are net negative. So they're actually feeding renewable energy into the grid. Of course, they also take something from the grid. That needs to be managed, but net negative. And when I tell this to people, they're stunned. It can be done. It's just technology is available. It's time to take action. Measure, digitize, improve, and then execute.
And what does that look like if you're retrofitting, say, older buildings?
Oh, thank you very much. That's like a penalty for me, a penalty shot, that I can take. So we have a lovely client in France who has a hotel 600 years old. So you would imagine that this is not fully digitized. But it's high class. In this case, they have a 1-star Michelin restaurant in the hotel, and they figured during COVID that they need to take a new approach. So we've been working with them, put a full building management system into the hotel. You would say, many people have building management systems, but we were looking room by room, and the CEO of the hotel can say how much energy they're using in rooms, over occupancy, and so forth. First year, 15% reduction. Of course, it gets more difficult every year. Until 2030, their commitment is 40% less. You can say, okay, 40% is not sufficient. I agree, if not everybody would do it. If everybody would do it, our problem would be resolved.
So we started off talking about large language models and what you all have been doing. Where do you see the role of generative AI in this?
So we've started to deploying it early, starting last year in some of our products, because stuff gets complicated. And when you track all the data, you give them prescriptors. You have operational data, you have engineering data, you have carbon data, and so forth. So what in this case ChatGPT helps us saying, give me all data points that is related to pump ABC, and it will look in the system for pump ABC. That's what it does very well, and gives you all data points, and then you work your way forward from there, as opposed to knowing exactly where all the respective data is. The software helps you to do it. So we've incorporated it into all our software packages.
So what's the value add? We were talking about what it was like to be in Dubai for COP28 and having companies together in a space discussing implementation. Do you feel like that's the biggest value add for you being here as a CEO at WEF?
The biggest, and we've talked about the big difference of COP28s to the prior COPs was that the private sector was invited, a lot of companies were there, and we had a lot of discussions. Now, what can we do as a company? Of course, we work with our clients, and I don't want to do the sales pitch, but it is how can you pivot industries to make changes? So we've, and we start off with ourselves. So we started the Zero Carbon Project. I said 1,000 of our top 1,000 suppliers that we have, we asked them to work with us together to reduce CO2 footprint until 2025, so next year, and the next year, by 50%. End of last year, we're 24, so we're half, and we started in 21. So, that created quite some attention. Then we said, why don't we do this in larger communities? So we've gone to all our semiconductor suppliers and said, why, if we put you all together, we tell you what's possible, you bring your community in. And so that's a program called Catalyze, with Google in there, with Intel in there, with HP in there, we have AMD in there. On the pharmaceutical side, we started a little earlier, 500 companies already. And so we start, communities, and I need to meet the CEOs here to start communities. So we have
what new communities are you going to start here?
So we're looking at hard-to-abate sector. For this time, I'm meeting a couple CEOs to have them as founding members. Too early to talk about. I'd rather talk about the egg when it's out.
Okay, well, I'm afraid we are out of time, but I want to thank you very much for joining us. For our audience, we've got lots more exciting events throughout the week with speakers like OpenAI's Sam Altman is going to be here, along with Palantir's Alex Karp. So please make sure to register at Axios.com and stick around for some networking and meet some of our team. Thanks, everyone. Thank you, Peter.
Thank you very much.